Welcome back to the next part of our series, where last week we looked at understanding what it was we wanted from life, and this part is about, now that you know what you want, figuring out where you are and how we make a plan to achieve that. Okay, so if we come back to the basic equation of knowing and growing, so you know how you want to live and give. Again, I've got a creative example of working out how you can come up with a plan. And lots of people are very familiar with budget, which is probably what we're going to cover today, but I want you to think about this a little bit differently. When you were young, and we were all little, we probably had something that we wanted to save for. So we feel very comfortable when we have the idea of a piggy bank. And indeed, I was talking to a young couple the other day, and their little girl said, "How can I save more?" And that's essentially all we're trying to do when we come up with a budget and an idea of how we want to achieve our financial well-being plan. The difference between when we were little is that when you were little, you found ways of finding money, or being gifted money, or doing little jobs, and you put the money in. And then at the end of the day, there was one goal, and you took that money out when you reached that target, and you went and spent it. As adults, obviously, it's a lot more complicated. So let's be honest, when we do talk about money, and the reason a lot of people shy away from it is because it comes with so much complexity, and it can be overwhelming. So again, a nice little example is that just like your piggy bank, we have graduated as adults into understanding how we can come up with a plan as a teapot. And a little bit like a piggy bank, there's a way for things to get in, which is obviously when you pour your water in. And like your piggy bank, instead of there being a hole and you take your savings out and you spend it, you actually can pour into different cups, being different purposes in your life. So if you take my teapot example for coming up with your plan, a traditional way when people hear the word budget, they think, oh, okay, they're going to want to know what I spend it on and how I can save. But just like a teapot, there are two parts to coming up with your plan. There is one way, how to earn more, which is often forgotten or not really emphasised, just as much as deciding how we can pour smaller amounts or more amounts into the right parts that are going to bring us meaning and purpose in our life. I personally am very passionate about the earning more. And so we're going to just have a brief discussion on that, because that's a whole topic on itself, and there are so many people that you can go to for help of understanding how you can earn more in your life. The second part of today is talking about, okay, where do you pour it? How much are you pouring? Do you have a good handle of where it is, or are you just literally pouring everywhere? Which a lot of people will do. So I take the extremes of life. Some people will live just day to day. Whatever they have in their pocket for that day, they will spend for that day. But we in our Pacific community, we are very responsible people, and that comes with a lot of duty and obligation. So there's not a lot of us that can live day to day. We can't literally spend what we have. There are things that have meaning to us. There are values in us taking care of our elderly as much as our young. And so the idea is, okay, how are we going to take care of all of that if it's not just a matter of like a piggy bank, saving for one target, or living on a day-to-day basis and just having to buy for what you need in the day. So we come up with these things called a budget. And so if we put to the side of how we might be able to earn more, and we just focus on, okay, if you know how much you earn, which is usually quite easy, it's usually from a job or from a benefit or an allowance, or maybe you have a gift or of some sort, you can probably very easily know how much you earn. The part that often we feel quite comfortable when we talk about budgets is, okay, how do you work out where are you spending in life? And a very easy way to do it is, if you spend straight off your EFTPOS card or always out your bank, you can go and look at your bank statements. And that's what banks are doing these days when they're trying to understand your spending habits. And so I encourage you, banks do it for a reason, but you should do it for the reason of understanding how you're living. So essentially, if you were to take your bank statements and you were to download them or print them out, and you were to highlight all the different types of spending that you're doing in really large groups, so you don't want to know how many times you spent at McDonald's or how much you spent on the groceries. What you want to do is have like big categories, like how much do I spend on food, how much do I spend on shelter, which might be your mortgage or it might be your rent, Well, it might be an allowance that you give your mum and dad. How much do I spend on clothing, which might be a little bit less regular, and entertainment. And so one of the things I've touched on there, when you're starting to come up with a budget and understanding, is understanding how you've lived in the past, because that's the best way for us to work out, okay, we can use that as an example of how might we live going forward. Because we all know when you go and visit someone and you say, yes, I want to save towards a house or a car, you're probably going to put your best foot forward, and you're going to forget all the things that possibly you do in your life on a normal everyday basis. So it's important to look at history to understand how you have behaved, because probably you're going to behave very similar, or at the very least you can understand what you might have been doing that you might want to change going forward. So the spending part can very easily be done if you do it always through your bank. Now, a lot of people will take cash, and so if you withdraw cash out of an ATM, you've got a little bit more tricky work in that you can't just go to a bank statement and look at how much you've spent on. So instead for that, you're going to have to keep the receipts or keep a little notebook. And that sounds complicated, but you don't have to do it for a very long time. You really want to give yourself time to understand yourself and because often what I find is people think they're spending money in a certain way, but how they're actually spending is quite different. So you want to give yourself enough time to understand things. And another good tip I have is if you ever come to a point in your life and you need to get a loan, and the banks are going to understand, in this day and age, they're going to want to understand your spending behaviour. They are going to do this for you, and they do not know you like you know you. So I often say to people that on their journey to getting into a loan is you go first, you look at how you're spending, and you start reporting to yourself how you're spending, so that when you go to a bank, it's not going to be a surprise when they say, oh, I've taken all your bank statements and I see all these ATM withdrawals, so I'm assuming you spent that on entertainment. But what you're going to do is actually, yes, I had some ATM withdrawals, but this is what I've done with my money, and this was a one-off, because that's very important when you look at your spending behaviour. What stuff is regular and what stuff is just one-off, because events happen to us. And if you were to go to a bank for a loan, for instance, they might see something and think that's your typical behaviour forever, which it's not. One-offs happen, such as your car. Something happens to your car in a certain month, but it doesn't happen all year round. So we're starting to create knowledge of how you have been spending, so then you can decide how you want to continue that on. Topic that we hope to cover in our next session, which is to do with these special occasions in our life, and it's the giving of our Pacifica community. So come along and join us just to discuss how giving forms part of our plans. Thank you.